I was thinking about this. Um, why in the Middle Ages, practically during the kingdoms, the kings, the counts, the monarchs, the nobility practically intermarried with other monarchs and wanted to expand their family in this respect, even to an extent in breeding actually, to actually make sure that they have an ally at the other side. That is why you have, I believe, German and French kings even ruling over England, because they were of German descent. In England, I believe. I don't know the name now, but I read it somewhere. They all intermarried to make alliances, and that was what marriage was practically part of the political or power games back then. As you just count yourself, if you have a family, you know that you will support each other. It's like a team, it's a family unit, it's really strong. Doesn't matter what you do. If you have a brother or sister that you grow up with your entire life practically, or a mother and a father, or even uncles and aunts, grandmothers, grandfathers, all intertwined, you would all help each other. So back then in the nobility, they thought of marrying out their sisters to the king of France, as an example, to gain political influence or power over that society, because they know that they can rely on their sister to influence the king, or they can rely on their brother to marry the Queen of England, as an example. Well, in those times. I'm just saying, not today. She's too old. So it was back then. Marriage was not seen as something for love, actually, but as a power, a strategic power play of the ruling family elites back then. And if you upbreed a population and the natural nobility actually rules over a population, these are beautiful women. They're not ugly, they're from the nobility and high-bred. And that's how I view it in the future when this natural order is put back into place. They will not inbreed, but they will breed up a population, and at the same time they will intermarry within the different kingdoms, such that you have a family, strong sense of family unit. Alliances are formed. Imagine your brother or your sister ruling over her as a duchess, over her dukes, over her small part of the country. You know that your brother and your sister will help you unless you really have an evil fight and cut off connection and you make your sister your enemy or something also happens. But normally, actually, in normal families, I believe, there is this connection in the family that everybody supports each other. Of course, due to social engineering and constant brainwashing propaganda from Hollywood via the TV programming, actually, to behave in certain ways. You do not see practically the folk body as your family. You do not see actually your blood as your family or your race as your family. That's why people choose the wrong partners, and at the same time these relationships don't last, and then you have these patchwork families where I come from. I had a stepdad, my father married twice and divorced twice, my mother married twice and divorced twice. Now we have half brothers, half sisters, all intertwined in patchwork families actually. But if you have a couple, a man and a woman getting children, and they consciously come together and chose each other as practically the best partner to have children with, and you know that you have a responsibility for the folk, you put the responsibility of the folk, the people, above your own, and that you have to raise the next generation by bearing children. That's what in the Third Reich it's propagated. They taught the people on how to choose their partners. There are videos online, difficult to see or find, where you can actually see UFA films of those times, where they actually taught the young men and women on how to pick their partners. Has to be of same intellect, same attractiveness, or even better, such that the people start upbreeding themselves. And these healthy people actually had the fewest children back then. They had a demographic problem. They needed a new generation to support each other, and they did not want this by immigration, but by replenishing their own numbers by getting enough children. The Third Reich social family politics. So if you put these differences aside of how your partner has to be and everything, you find somebody of your own intellect, your own level of thinking, and your own level of attractiveness, then you can consciously go and have practically found a family unit with this woman. This is practically a monogamous relationship, but you will have a partner. I don't know if the future is polygamous or how we will behave sexually in this sexually repressed society. The booming sex industry proves that there is a need for sex, and that this booming sex industry is actually fulfilling the needs of the men in the society, whereas it should be a normal sexual activity level. So back then, also in the Middle Ages, the marriages were about strategic power plays, not about love. And the troubadours went from were young men who wanted to see the countryside and nations, and they chanted and had poems, and they did it in this beautiful way that to entertain the people, but at the same time passing messages on. They were practically the social media back then, because the troubadours traveled from city to city with the latest news. And they got sometimes intertwined with the women of the nobility. And I'm reading the book from Against the Crusades. Hold on. Well, I downloaded the Kindle version of Crusades Against the Grail from Otto Rahn. I'll put a picture in between. And it depicts at the very beginning the so-called troubadours and how they actually intertwined with the nobility and seduced the women, and horrific events happened actually. I don't know if it's true, but apparently a troubadour got intertwined with a noblewoman of a local monarch, a count I believe, and he got in love with her, chanted for her, sung her poems, and something happened in between them. And the count practically had this troubadour killed, beheaded actually, his heart ripped out, and he told his cook to cook the heart really nicely in a really nice sauce and spicy and whatever, and with herbs, and they served this to his wife practically at dinner. And I'm just going to tell the story then, think of she ate it, and he says with a smile, "Yeah, did you enjoy your meal?" "Yes, it was delicious. What is it?" she says. And he says, "Well, it's the heart of your lover, the troubadour." And he pulls out the head of the troubadour in his hand to prove to her that it was really the heart. She apparently fainted. Then she woke up, and then she told him that it's the last meal that I'll ever take. She ran out and committed suicide by jumping over the balcony. Now, I don't know if this is a real story. Apparently, Otto Rahn, a really known writer of the Middle Ages, actually, and well, he was part of the Waffen of the SS. No? Just Google him online. Interesting storyline that he had. Depicts this, that these stories were apparently back then, these things happened. Or conspiracies. Yeah, there's a woman, a wife of a monarch or count again, a local king, King of Aragon, 1100 I believe. And she sees that he is in love or seduced by another woman. And what does she do? She has that woman poisoned to remove her competition. So this gives us an insight to what possibly there were conspiracies in these kingdoms back then. I don't know. I always see kingdoms have to be in peace actually, but back then the entire Middle Ages was full of wars. Now we don't know what the Zionist or Jewish infiltration and revisionist history is on this and why this all happened. But back then in the kingdoms, the men and the women had real power, and there were intrigues to gain power or more influence over certain countries. So marriage was practically a strategical power game that back then to secure alliances. Now I don't know which one is the evil guy talking to these kings to do this and that. You always see in Lord of the Rings as an example, an evil person approaching the king and telling him what to do. I don't know what the revisionist history is on this. Yeah, we rely on monks or priests that wrote this all down, or I don't know, the stories or books, of course, books as well. Back then they also had books, I believe, but written books by her hand. And all these scandals back then were written down. Now, we don't know if it's true. We don't know if back then there was also some type of propaganda going on, and the media controlled by the Zionist Jews back then as well. There was, in the Middle Ages, there was a lot of anti-Semitism. Could it be that back then they also had influence over society back then, over the kings and over the monetary system? Well, 800 years in the future, 1800s, 1700s, French Revolution, we know that the banks that funded the revolution were all in Jewish hands. So I'm reading this book, it's really interesting, and the stories are fascinating. So much intrigue, so much murders actually going on over to get power. Even the women acting and killing off competition. It's harsh. I hope that the future kingdoms that will be in peace are not that way. I hope that it's going to be a peaceful kingdom, that there are not going to be intrigues to murder each other. Another way of securing alliances is by getting a lot of children. If you're a king, actually should have many children in society, because he will put practically his blood in positions of power. A family unit. You trust each other more. If you have your family practically with you on the top, and you have many children who will take positions up in society, then you know that they're all allied practically by a bloodline. And they will all work together in peace. So that's why also the pharaohs of the ancient Egypt, who was an Aryan society, an Aryan superculture, you have to look at March of the Titans, a history of the white race, and search up the white history on Egypt. Just look it up. They had one queen actually. No? The pharaoh always had this pharaoh queen, like Queen Nefertiti, who ruled alone. They had power, the women back then as well. You always have to view it as the man and the woman being in power. If the man falls away, the woman takes over. So Queen Nefertiti, as an example, ruled on her own. In ancient Egypt. They also had concubines, the kings, to get as many children as possible. Well, that is from touregypt.net. Ramesses II, Anatomy of a Pharaoh, his family, specifically his women. And they go down here. Before Ramesses II was a great king, he had a family, and throughout his reign, his growing family would serve to strengthen the rule of Egypt. In fact, all of the rulers in Egypt, Ramesses II may have had one of the largest of all families, consisting of many wives and as many as 50 sons and 50 daughters of his principal cohorts. So he had one ruling wife, the so-called queen. Well, that is according to Yahoo. He had only one queen, who had, well, his main wife, who also ruled the country and praised the gods with him. That is, well, what Sienna answers. Yeah, well, she was the queen by his side, but at the same time, he has many concubines to strengthen the family and to strengthen his rulership over the kingdom. Well, this is from reshafim.org. And the beginnings of the royalty harem. Abydos was surrounded by tombs of women. Well, supposedly his minor wives. Well, he had multiple concubines and one queen, or one main wife and multiple wives or concubines. Apart from their obvious reproductive role, well, to get children, they may have been used to strengthen political bonds within the king and regional nobles. Just as during the New Kingdom, the pharaohs entered into international alliances with the great kings of the times and accepted the protestations of loyalty of the kingdoms of the Levant. By adding their daughters to their harems and important tools in dynastic politics. Towards the end of the Old Kingdom, the king's main wife headed the harem. The king's children were brought up in the harem, and at times the offerings of royal favorites and foreign hostages were educated with the little princesses. Hatshepsut was one of the lucky children to get such an education, presumably among the best in the kingdom, and becoming friends of royalty at an early age. Well, if you read March of the Titans, A History of the White Race, you will see that ancient Egypt was an Aryan culture, Aryan superculture, that also had this transgression into the mixed subrace, what it is today. What's happening practically now in all of white Europe and America. In all white countries, multiculturalism will lead practically to the dissolution of the Aryan genes and practically the disappearance of this race. Make sure that they can put everywhere their offspring in positions of power to forge a blood alliance practically in the kingdom. And this was stabilizing. Imagine a politician, what a big family, and I wouldn't trust to these politicians. God, no. But imagine a ruling elite that natural nobility practically, who are all somehow interconnected, and half this family are binded by blood. So the future kingdoms will be a combination of past. The natural nobility will be restored, and they will look after the folk body, and they're in their own best interest, actually. The Third Reich was a good example of people with good intentions being in power. It's the truth. If you research the truth for 7-8 years, as I did, it was demonized and destroyed because they do not want everybody to find out the truth. It could be economically or be racially eugenics, upbreeding a population, implementing the natural laws. They want you to not look at this. At the same time, there's a negative birth rate, and they want us practically not to have children, at least in Europe, well, all white countries. And at the same time, they solve this birth rate problem by massive immigration. Actually, we're being driven to extinction. In 50 years, we'll be a minority in Europe and in America. Now, you could say it's okay, but I find it sad. Every people on this planet, every race has the right to exist and not be driven to extinction. Be conditioning by mass programmation, schools, universities, formal education systems, massive TV programming. That multiculturalism is the natural way to go. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed this video. Cheers.